Jung, and I was especially interested in your accent, how you chose the particular way that Jung was to speak.
Well, the accent thing was something that we talked about right off, I think, at the first meeting, actually. And we came up with the first idea was sort of mid-Atlantic, and then we realized we didn't know what that meant.
So it involved drowning and other things.
Yeah, it's out in the middle of nowhere. And so then we decided, you know, I always think that, you know, this sort of received pronunciation, which is a sort of standard English speech, is always a good place to go when you're dealing with a period piece. I think because it is a neutral accent and allows an audience to access into that. And it's, then within that we wanted to sort of have a difference between Viggo's and mine. So Viggo's would have been more clipped and mine would have been a little bit softer than a really sort of high clipped received pronunciation. So it was a little bit more colloquial, the idea that, you know, it comes from Switzerland with more sort of the difference between Switzerland and Austria and all these little nuances, even, you know, with physicality and the sort of outlook to life, and where both sort of characters come from, you know, and the fact that, you know, Jung comes from this sort of religious background, his father and 6 uncles being pastors, and then you have Freud coming from the Jewish community. So it's like you have to think and factor all of those things in, and then we also thought, you know, the fact that, well, that was David, you know, that Kira used the Russian accent, because again, that would be a different place coming into a different world. And the key things that I sort of tried to touch into were that sort of spiritual sort of element to him by the end. I was interested very much in, you know, I looked at the Red Book a lot and the illustrations there, which seemed quite psychedelic and so far removed from the person that I wanted to represent at the beginning of the film, who is a young man who's ambitious, determined, and unsure of himself, and feels like he's got a lot to prove. And so he contains himself in a sort of very contained persona, but everything's sort of bubbling up on the inside. And that's why, like, you know, I also wanted to make a point that he's somebody that eats very vigorously. And through that I wanted to show us, you know, that there was a sensual element to the character that was essentially there and ready to come out. So by the end, even the clothing that, you know, we discussed, you know, the cardigan, his posture is less restricted and less sort of conformed by the society around him, where we see him at the beginning, where he's very correct. And he starts into his descent and in his nervous breakdown. And then what was interesting to me is after the film ends, what does the man become later? And it was interesting watching footage on YouTube, and I could see sort of mannerisms and what seemed to me a very content and self-assured man in his later years. So all of that knowledge you kind of mix up into a bowl and stir it around, and hopefully something comes out.
I'm so impressed, I had no idea. I just thought he was reading the script, basically.
Cheers.
One last thing, Christopher, could you talk about